There are instances on battlefields of gruesome, gruesome wars where people have their hands up and they live. And those are on battlefields. And we're talking about freeways.
I think now when I hear the word police, I feel very differently than I did when I was younger.
Good afternoon, scale tippers, and welcome to Balance Point, the show that tries to balance the scales, and if we can't, we at least weigh both sides. Now, I won't deny having a bias on my part, and we'll see that as the channel continues, but I'm going to try to give at least something of a middle ground. Now on to today's topic. We're going to cover the use of force, and time and again, we see that the news shows a cop shooting someone and says the person was unarmed, or that in some other way that the shooting was unjustified. So today we're going to look at why this may be, and if these situations are as clear-cut as they're made out to be. The first thing we have to look at is what makes a justifiable shooting. In my own training, you have to have at least 3 things to justify a shooting. These 3 things, when put together, make up the deadly force triangle. The first is capability, a way to use lethal force against you. The second, opportunity, being close enough to use that lethal force. The final, intent, showing some sign that you're going or are willing to use that lethal force. However, we must realize that these situations come fast and judgments must be made on the fly. The next argument we often hear is that pepper spray or some other less than lethal tool such as a taser should be used over a lethal implement like a firearm. However, tools like that are control tools to be used against non-lethal threats, not lethal ones. Why is that, you ask? Well, let's take a look at pepper spray. So did it look like that hampered him at all? Well, what about a taser? Surely that has to work. I mean, it knocks you down, right? Well, first of all, it must make full contact. Secondly, it's single shot. Finally, there's this.
I'll get you, bitch!
So as you can see, these tools don't always work. Now, do we get why it's not the best idea to try and use them against a lethal threat like a bat, knife, or any other tool? What other factors can play into the choice to shoot? Well, the 21-foot rule is one of them. This is linked to a training drill called the Tuller Drill. It basically shows you that if a person is within inside of 21 feet, they can charge you and be on top of you with their weapon before you can draw. Now think about how close cops are when they're doing their job. And the Tuller Drill has you expecting an attack. If you're not expecting it, your reactions are going to be even slower. One of the major things that plays into this reaction time is the OODA Loop, or Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act Loop. These are the basic steps that you go through mentally when deciding to respond to a threat. You first must observe it, orient in its direction, decide what you're going to do, and then act. So the more things you're dealing with at the time, the longer the delay in your response. To get an idea of how long that process could take, me and my boyfriend stood with a pistol in its holster, ready to go. On the word go, we would draw, get a sight picture of our threat, and then fire. This on average took us anywhere from 0.98 to 1.5 seconds, and again, this is knowing we were going to have to shoot. So having to decide that on the fly when you're not expecting to have to use your weapon can put you probably anywhere from 3 to 4 seconds behind the curve, and this is a long time when facing a lethal threat. So let us look at 2 cases that often come up as signs of a bad shoot. The first is the case of Mr. Felindo Castile. In this case, the officer that pulled Mr. Castile over was looking for an armed bank robber, and he pulled over the wrong people. Somewhere at the start of the stop, Mr. Castile informed the officer that he was armed, and sometime during the stop, Mr. Castile was shot, with the officer saying he fired because he thought Mr. Castile was going for his gun. Now people are saying that he was just going for his wallet, but watch this. Do I look armed? Nope, just going for my wallet. You see that? Now, maybe the gun wasn't in my jacket pocket. Most people keep their wallet in their pants, so how about this? Do you see the size of this pistol? Do you see how big it was, and how easy it is to conceal? So can you understand why an officer who knows these type of things might be jumpy? This case also highlights why another common argument of just shoot them in the arm is a bad idea. Mr. Castile was shot anywhere from 3 to 5 times, and the shots were to his arm, and yet he still died. Why? Because it's likely that he bled out from a severed brachial artery. The brachial artery is a major artery that runs through the upper portion of both of your arms, and that's most likely the cause of death. So can we see why that in itself is a poor argument? This case is sad, but hopefully we can see why the cop, having been on edge already looking for an armed bank robber, might have made the choices he did, and how communication on both sides might have saved lives. But what about opportunity, capability, and intent? Well, during a traffic stop, the person is close enough to use any weapon they want, so that gives opportunity. He was known to be armed. He told the officer as much. There we have capability. So if the officer thought that Mr. Castile was going for his gun, we have the last part of the deadly force triangle. So while he might have been mistaken in what Mr. Castile was doing, can we see now why he might have made the choice he did? If he thought he was going for the gun, how long should he wait? By the time you see it, it's too late. So really, what other choice would he have felt that he had? Now the next case mentioned is the case of Anton Sterling. In that case, the man is on the ground and the cops are yelling for him to give them his hands. People will say, oh, well, the gun's not out. Can you hear that? Do you remember the big revolver from earlier? I can fire it from within my pocket. I can even raise my leg and point my leg around while shooting. The officers at this time even yelled that he was going for a gun. So again we see all three sides of the deadly force triangle met, at least in the minds of the officers. So what should these people have done? In Mr. Castile's case, he'd started out doing the right thing. Let the officer know that you are legally armed. Then ask the officer if he wishes to take control of your weapon. If the officer says yes, do what he tells you. If he says no, ask him how he wants to proceed, and then do what he tells you to do. As you're doing these things, I recommend telling the officer what you're doing each step of the way. So for example, if the officer says no, just show me your ID. Tell the officer, okay, I'm going to reach for my wallet now. As you get your hand on your wallet, officer, I have my wallet, I'm going to pull it out slowly. And do so slowly. Now this might seem a little extreme, however, it will go a long way into putting the officer at ease, because we don't know why they're stopping us. They may have a real reason to think we might be dangerous. As in the case with Mr. Castile's stop, the officer thought he was looking for an armed bank robber. What about Mr. Sterling? In his case, it was simply a two-step process. A, don't fight the cops. You will not win. B, don't go for things in your pocket when they're trying to get control of your arms. And especially don't do it when they're yelling at you not to. What about another common argument? An unconscious bias or fear against people of color.
I 100% believe that this country is afraid of black men because this country has been taught that black men are inherently monsters. In every video we've seen of these police shooting these black men, if you look into that police officer's eyes, they are rarely calm. They're usually freaking out. They're usually heightened beyond imagination.
Well, that does not exist according to a Harvard study that I will link in the description. So, if that bias does not exist, why are cops so jumpy? Well, could it be that they feel they're under attack because of things like this? But are video clips like that a sign that the cops are right in how they feel? Are cops at greater risk now than they were in the past? Not according to two different studies that I found, which again I will link in the description. Well, the same reason people think that crime is worse than ever, even though it's been on the downtrend for a decade or more, is the reason that cops are more jumpy than they have been in the past. The news. The news hype things up, distorting our reality. They're worried about things for the same reason me and you are. So what can we do about it? Cops, please start showing us when the bad guys among you are punished. Yes, I know you do arrest and punish your own, but it's often done behind closed doors and as silently as possible. This leads to people believing that nothing is being done. As for the rest of us, understanding proper use of force and the things that go into a cop's decision-making can go a long way in easing our minds. And it's somewhere in the middle of these two things that we will find the balance. And that's the balance point.